Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. Today, I'm reacting to my third and final Midnight Tales video today. And you're probably wondering, why am I wearing different clothes? Well, I decided to get comfortable in my PJs and it's getting late tonight, so I thought I'd go ahead and film this video so I can upload it tomorrow, hopefully. And also, I'm wearing my mask because this video is titled 6 Scary True Halloween Horror Stories, so I figured it's a Halloween video, I might as well put on my Halloween mask. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the lights off, move the camera up here for you guys, and let's get this reaction over and done with. Okie dokie, here we go.
It was my turn to take my kids trick-or-treating.
Okie
The
dokie.
previous year was my wife's, and we trade back and forth every year. My son and daughter are 7 and 9. Usually, I stay on the street while my kids go up to the different houses to collect candy. After about half an hour of walking around, we reached one of the main streets in the neighborhood, a popular hotspot for candy collecting.
To be honest with you, I miss them old days of putting on a costume and going trick-or-treating. Those are some fond memories. You or anybody you know is still young enough to trick-or-treat, you better enjoy it while you can, okay? Well, let's continue.
The lawns were filled with cool decorations and animatronics, and I got a bit distracted, not watching my kids too closely. At one point, they came back from a house accompanied by another girl about the same height as my daughter. She wore a strange homemade mask, like a cardboard cutout or something. My daughter asked if the girl could join us for trick-or-treating, so I said sure, and we continued together as a group. I didn't know who this girl was, but I figured she was a friend from school. As we walked, I started noticing a large man trailing us, wearing an unsettling, angry-looking cat mask. It was pretty creepy, to be honest. I assumed he was the girl's father, so I tried to make small talk, saying something like, "Nice weather, eh?" But he didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at me, while our kids went up to the next house. I tried again, asking, "Hey, is that your daughter?" He nodded, but didn't say a word. Figuring he just wasn't in the mood for chatting, I stopped trying. We carried on for about another 15 minutes, until out of nowhere, my kids came up to me and said they wanted to go home. This surprised me, as we hadn't been out for long, and their bags were only about a third full. In any case, I agreed, waved goodbye to the man in the cat mask and his daughter, and started on our way home. The weird thing was, when I glanced back, the man and his daughter were just standing there, staring at us. I checked one more time as we turned the corner, and they still hadn't moved at all. At this point, I decided to ask my kids, "So, who was that girl?" My daughter looked up at me with a confused expression. "She's your friend," she replied. I asked her what she meant. Apparently, the girl with the cardboard mask had approached them and claimed she was a friend of mine. She told my daughter she was too shy to ask me if she could join us, and asked my daughter to ask me instead. I laughed at this story and replied, "Why would you think she was my friend? I don't have any friends who are kids." What my daughter said next chilled me to the bone. According to her, when the girl in the cardboard mask first approached them, she wasn't wearing the mask, so they could see her face. It turns out she wasn't a girl at all, but an older woman around my age, with wrinkles on her face. What's even more disturbing, the woman had been stealing treats from my daughter's bag when I wasn't looking. This was why my kids had asked to go home. The woman was creeping them out, and they just wanted to get away from her. I brought my kids home and told my wife what happened. We made sure to check through all their candy, but didn't find anything suspicious. We didn't call the police or anything, since nothing serious had happened.
Well, I would have, because it seems like there were a bunch of drug type people that were having the munchies for candy. Oh, lordy. No, that won't fly with me.
But thinking back, I kind of regret that decision.
Yeah, you think?
What the heck was that old woman doing? And who on earth was the man following us around? I don't think I'll ever know. It's unsettling to realize that there are people out there on Halloween, hiding behind masks and pretending to be children.
That's another thing, too. It'd be like they could pull it off just like in a snap. Probably change their voice, and if they're smaller people, it helps out a lot better that way because then you can fool people a lot easier.
This was a few years ago. Funny enough, it was on Halloween. A friend and I were driving around, just passing the time and checking out the rich part of town where people really go all out to show off their wealth with decorations. Fog machines, lights, sounds, music, the whole 9 yards. As we drove down one street, we came across a row of houses with all their lights turned off. Not a single light, except for the moonlight and our car headlights. This street was usually dark, with one exception. An older man who went all out every Halloween. His place was as creepy as could be, with skeletons, a witch in the background, and spooky chants and laughter echoing through the yard. My friend spotted a Take One candy bowl with full-sized candy bars, so he parked, got out, and headed over. I followed him past the mock graveyard, and we walked up to the bowl. As he reached into it, bam! A little hand popped out, making him jump, and he bolted back to the car.
I ain't gonna lie, but sometimes them things will make me jump too. But it seems like that guy got a lot of money to set up a lavish Halloween display, like they're describing.
Laughing, I grabbed a candy bar for myself and headed back when I realized something strange. Those eerie chants and other noises, they weren't coming from the decorations. I mentioned this to my friend, and we decided to drive a little further. He remembered there was a nearby graveyard open all night, so we decided to check it out. It took a minute to get there, but as we got closer, we could hear the chants more clearly and saw faint lights in the distance. We turned off our car lights and drove in slowly. Halloween night in a graveyard? I joked that this was how horror movies started. But we figured we had the car and were big enough to take down a person or two if needed. Or maybe just some emo kids trying to summon a demon. Then we saw it. A group of people, dressed in robes, were dancing and chanting around a fire.
Oh, heck no. If they don't see you, back up quietly and get the police over there. Because you never know what these sick satanic individuals would do to you.
This wasn't a little twig fire. It was a 5-foot blaze made of logs and firewood. The people around it were dark-skinned, with face paint, including one older woman whose face was painted as she chanted and tossed things into the flames. Out of nowhere, she pulled out a chicken. It was either already dead or had just been killed. It hung limply in her hand. My friend and I looked at each other, not really scared, just in disbelief, and started laughing nervously. Then, she slowly turned her head and stared directly at us. We couldn't tell if she saw us, sensed us, or what, but she stared for a solid 10 seconds, then smiled and waved us over. My friend was in full nope mode. He put the car into gear, ready to floor it, and nothing happened. The car didn't move, almost no noise. It was like the engine had stalled. At that point, it felt like we'd crossed into based on a true story territory. One of the men with white face paint saw us too, and waved us over as if he wanted us to join them. Just then, the car finally woke up, and we got the hell out of there, not looking back a second.
Man, they must have been casting some strong witchcraft or something, because if that car wouldn't start when they got in, they were really trying to hold them back. But yeah, that would be spooky to even see. But I'd be like his friend, be like, nope. If I saw that happen and they started waving towards us. I'll be getting out of there quick.
This happened this past Halloween during my first semester in college. I'm a freshman, and while my amazing roommate was out getting drunk and partying with my ex-friends for the 100th time, I was alone and bored in my dorm room. I wasn't keen on risking COVID, but I couldn't stand being in that room any longer. So I thought, screw it, I want to go out. I started looking around on my phone, and somehow came across a girl claiming to be a freshman who invited a group of 10 people to a party her friends were throwing. She promised it would be socially distanced. Luckily, a couple of friends of mine wanted to join the party too, as long as we social distanced and wore our masks. The girl sent us the address and told us to say Monica invited us at the door. This is where things got weird. One of my ex-friends decided to head to the party alone without waiting for us. I was still putting on makeup. When he got there, he followed Monica's instructions, but the guy at the door refused to let him in and called him a slur. This friend is a bit odd, so we thought, if anything seems off, we'll just leave. After driving there in my friend Steve's car, Mary and I got out and were immediately dumbfounded. We weren't expecting a mansion, but this place was a literal dump, and the neighborhood was filthy and pitch dark. Even though the place creeped us out, we'd already spent 30 minutes getting there, so we decided to check it out anyway. We walked up to the door, which was answered by a guy who was absolutely wasted and probably on a few different drugs. We told him, "We're Monica's friends." He looked confused, glanced at Mary and me, then just silently nodded and opened the door, completely ignoring Steve.
I would not dare go into a place where there's a bunch of people that are high or drunk. And plus, I'll be leaving somebody in the car while I will be checking the place out. And if I don't like it, I'm getting out of there and tell the person to start the car.
What met us inside was certainly not what we expected. About 20 frat guys were huddled around a table full of booze and drugs, silently watching a girl, the only other female there, give a guy a lap dance. No masks, no social distancing, nothing. We were the only ones wearing them. Feeling weirded out, we headed down a huge black staircase in the middle of the cramped living room. But instead of finding another group of people or Monica and her friends, we were greeted by what looked like a scene from a horror movie. At least 8 locked black doors, like something straight out of Saw, lined the hallway. Steve tried one of the doors, but it was locked. Then we watched in horror as another door slowly opened, and 2 greasy middle-aged men crawled out, looking at Mary and me in a weirdly perverted way. Just then, a man who looked like a bouncer appeared and started shouting at Steve. "Who the hell invited you here?" "Monica," we all replied, completely confused. The guy, looking puzzled, just goes, "Who the hell is Monica?" We took that as our cue to leave, but as we headed up the stairs, the bouncer began shoving and tried to tackle Steve to the ground. As we bolted out of that crack house horror show, confused and shaken, we spotted Monica and 2 other girls dressed provocatively, standing outside. She looked white as a sheet, gave a small, awkward giggle, and waved as we got the hell out of there, never looking back. The takeaway? Don't go to random parties in large cities you're unfamiliar with. The weird part, or maybe not so weird in hindsight, was that Monica originally tried to get me to come alone, knowing I was a female. Looking back, I think the people at the party and Monica only had an issue with Steve being there. They definitely didn't expect Mary to bring her boyfriend, or for me to come with friends. Later, Steve told us he was convinced it was either a drug house or a front for a prostitution ring, trying to lure Mary and me in.
I hope she don't hang out with her no more. Because that's just wrong. You tell her it's a Halloween party going on, and all of a sudden it's a daggum place where a lot of guys are just having fun with this one girl. Like you said, a prostitution ring. No. I can see why that bouncer was getting all upset. They didn't want no other guys in there. They just wanted the girls. I'll be mad for everybody. I'm calling the cops to have that place shut down. Makes me sick to the stomach that people do that.
I'm writing this only a few hours after everything happened. Now that I've calmed down and the sun is coming up, I feel somewhat safer. Last night, I was lying in bed reading a little before I went to sleep. I think it's important to clarify that I live on the outskirts of my town, not exactly rural, but right on the edge, off the highway that leads out of town and into a 15-mile stretch of mostly open country. Woods, fields, a few residences, but largely empty highway. Other than the other tenants in my apartment building, it's normally very quiet here. My building is a square with 4 apartments, each door facing out into the open. There's no lobby or foyer. My door in particular faces a large field that slopes up a hill. I don't remember the exact time, but sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., someone started banging on my door. That freaks me out at the best of times, but especially in the middle of the night.
Yeah, I agree, because if you're just sitting there like reading a book or about to fall asleep and then all of a sudden you hear a bang at the door, you know that can't be good.
Nervously, I went to the door and asked who it was. A man with a deep voice claimed he was a police officer and said I needed to let him in. That's exactly what he said. I needed to let him in. Not that I needed to open the door or anything. Thankfully, I listened to a lot of true crime stories, so my instincts kicked in and I got suspicious immediately. I had alarm bells going off because he couldn't tell me why I needed to let him in, what I supposedly did, or even ask for my name. Also, he didn't really sound like a cop, if you know what I mean. Creeped out, I called 911 to confirm if there was an officer at my address. They told me there wasn't. At this point, I was freaking out. I shouted through the door that I was on the phone with the police, and the guy banged on the door once more before going silent. I assume he took off at that point. Dispatch sent 2 police cars to my apartment, and the officers took a good look around. Unfortunately, the guy was long gone by the time they got here, and since I never saw him, I didn't have a description to give. The officers did 2 things to help put me at ease. First, they said they'd post more patrols in my area over Halloween weekend. Second, they assured me that this was most likely a Halloween prank, as the bar down the street had just closed not too long before. Always trust your instincts, and remember that if you have doubts about someone claiming to be a police officer, call 911 to confirm their identity. The dispatcher and officers who came tonight told me that you will not get in trouble for making sure the person talking to you is actually an officer. This also applies to situations where it's dark, and you can't tell if it's a real police car behind you. If you see flashing lights on a back road or dark area at night, turn on your hazard lights and call 911 first to make sure it's an actual officer. Better safe than sorry.
That is some good advice right there. And I'll take that into consideration, because if somebody was banging on my door late night and they claimed to be the cops, I'll be calling them and be like, do you have a cop in my area? And if they say, no, they don't, I wouldn't go like yell out the door saying, I've got the police on the phone. No, I'll be trying to keep talking to them until the cops do arrive and see if they can arrest the guy before he bolts. But like you said, it's probably been a Halloween prank, but it's one sick prank, that's for sure. Scaring the crap out of somebody, thinking that they're a real police officer.
It was Halloween of 2008. I was in college and still in a relationship with my first serious boyfriend. We'd been together since high school, but it took this night for me to finally see that our relationship was abusive. It took one more incident after that before I left him for good. He could be wonderful when sober, if intense and controlling. But when he drank, he was truly terrifying. This was the first incident that really scared me. He joined in a Gatorade and Shine challenge, where they'd drink a bottle of Gatorade half emptied and filled with moonshine. The goal was to finish the bottle within an hour, then tell crazy stories. He completed the challenge, but he never did tell his friends any stories. He couldn't remember most of what happened. and it painted him in a horrific light. I knew things were going downhill when he started calling me a slut just for saying hi to a guy friend at the party. I decided we'd better head home before things got worse. I thought I could manage it. We got home and changed out of our costumes. James wanted to have sex, but given his state and the things he'd called me, I wasn't interested. That only set him off more, and he called me a whore. I left the apartment to go smoke. Our neighbors were having a party, and 2 guys were outside smoking as well. They came over to check on me since I'd been crying and they'd heard the yelling. I said I was fine, though they could clearly see I wasn't. They told me if I needed help, they'd be there. Just then, James came outside, saw them, and stalked toward them, telling them to get away from me. I stood up to get between them. They repeated their offer to help, warning him to watch himself. As I was facing them to say goodbye, one of the guys gasped, staring at James in shock. I turned around and looked down. When I realized what I was seeing, the other guy lunged forward and pulled me behind him. What was on the ground that had caused such a reaction, you ask? Blood. Blood was dripping onto the ground from his hand, where he'd been gripping a knife so tightly he'd sliced his own hand open. I begged him to drop it, which he agreed to only when I walked toward him. I know, it was incredibly dangerous and naive. The 2 guys were at a loss, and I feel bad that their Halloween was ruined by all this. They left after I assured them I'd be fine, reminding me that I could come to them for help. Back inside, I immediately hid all sharp objects and called James's roommates, begging them to come home. Meanwhile, he started screaming, demanding I give him the knives back, calling me a slut, and saying that if I wouldn't even sleep with him, then what use was I?
This guy don't know how to treat a woman. I tell you, man, if I was his roommate, I'd be like knocking the heck out of him and be like, how dare you call your girl a slut just because she ain't sleeping with you? Woo. I hate people like this, I tell you.
Finally, I called my parents and left. I also called his mom, afraid he'd hurt himself, but she told me he was my problem now. I should have called the police, but didn't want to ruin his life. I'm ashamed to say that I got back together with him and endured 6 more months of hell before I finally left for good.
Well, then right there, lady, tells you that he ain't a good person to be around with at all. And I can't believe his mother wouldn't even step up to straighten him out. Saying that it's her problem now. Are you kidding me? I would have taken them guys' advice and getting them to help her out in that situation and call the cops to get him to like a place to sober up, like in a jail cell maybe. Yeah, he acts like he's in control of her, but guess what, buddy? You're not. Another thing, I'm glad she got rid of the knives, because if she didn't, he probably would have stabbed her to death with them.
Halloween has, unfortunately, never been a big deal here in Scotland, and that's always bummed me out because I love Halloween. But after this year, I think I'll be happy never celebrating it again. My street and the next one over have a lot of young kids who go out trick-or-treating. So while I was out shopping all day with my mum, we decided to pick up some sweets in case anyone came to our door. I had plans to go to the cinema to see Ouija with my boyfriend, so when I got home, I was getting ready to go out while my mum was putting the shopping away. When the first load of kids came to the door, I was the one who answered it. There were children from our street, the next one over, and some I didn't recognize, plus an adult standing at the end of the path. He was dressed all in black, with a mask covering his face, though it wasn't anything I recognized from a movie. Anyway, the kids all told their jokes. I handed them their treats, and they headed off to the next house. I was about to close the door when I noticed that the guy with them was still standing at the end of my path. He wasn't looking at the children. He was looking right at me. My skin started to crawl as I realized he was just staring. I backed slowly into the house, watching him as he raised his hand and waved at me, very slowly. I was about to call out when my mum came to the door to check on me. As soon as he saw her, he took off in the opposite direction from the children. He hadn't been with them at all, and left as soon as he realized I wasn't home alone. I was completely freaked out and told my boyfriend all about it when he came to pick me up, but I quickly forgot about it while we were watching the movie. When I finally got home, it was late, and trick-or-treating was well and truly over. My mum was just getting ready to take the dogs out for their last walk and planned to meet my dad on his way home from work, so I'd be home alone. After a previous horrible encounter, I really hate being home alone, especially on Halloween.
I don't blame you if it's a creepy stalker guy out there. It'd be bad just to stay at home.
Anyway, I grabbed some snacks, went up to my room, and started working on my writing, scrolling through Tumblr and listening to music. After that first creepy encounter where some guys had come into my backyard, my dad bought a motion-censored light and attached it to the wall outside my window. Normally, it goes off whenever a cat walks along the fence and usually turns off after a couple of minutes. I always know when the light has come on because it lights up my whole room. While I was sitting at my computer, the light came on. I ignored it at first, but 5 minutes passed and it still hadn't gone off. I opened my blinds to see what was going on. My stomach dropped when I looked out and saw the creep from earlier, sitting on the fence, waving at my window to keep the light on. His waving slowed down when he spotted me, and I froze, completely creeped out. I had flashbacks to our earlier encounter and didn't know what to do. Luckily, I heard the front door open. My parents were home with the dogs. I rushed down the stairs and started yelling about the guy on the fence. Without a second thought, my dad took the dogs, ran through the house, threw open the back door, and shouted, "Get the hell out of here, you creep! I'm calling the police." Dad scared him off, but I convinced him not to actually call the police. I didn't want to relive the whole thing. I just wanted to forget the night and go to sleep. Yeah, I know you want to go to sleep, but I'll be calling the cops anyway, just to let them know that there was a creeper in the backyard and see if they could go chase after him and arrest him, so he could be off the street. But yeah, that is scary and spooky. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this Midnight Tales video reaction, a Halloween rendition. Whoa. This has been another successful installment of the Tin Man Score channel. I'm your host, Jeffrey Tin Man Taylor. I say that's a wrap, and that's day.